My podcast, By Reason of Air Safety, Episode 16, examined the effects the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978 had on the aviation industry, not just the airlines, but every corner of aviation. As promised, Episodes 17 through 20 of By Reason of Air Safety will focus on the regional airlines and the repair stations. In the aftermath of deregulation, out of necessity, both were transformed beyond their original intent. In addition, both regional airlines and repair stations have affected and have been affected by all aviation industries over the last few decades. In the years following deregulation, accidents and numerous safety incidents took place in the regional industry. The FAA, the NTSB, and in large part the airline industry itself barely focused on the unique problems regional airlines presented, experienced, and in many ways were left to their own devices. In similar ways, the FAA, the NTSB, and the airline industry didn't see that the repair station industry had grown, continues to grow, beyond its Part 145 certification, all in plain sight. These are not excuses for what's happened. These were not examples of ineffective corrective actions. Indeed, corrective actions never played a part. These were complete and unforgivable confusions on behalf of everyone. Now, perhaps the term confusions is too tame a word. These are monumental blunders, mismanagement, in short, incompetence on part of the FAA, the NTSB, the United States Congress, and all aviation industries. Regional airlines are not airlines in the conventional sense of the word. Regional airlines don't operate independently. They don't serve their own customers. Instead, regionals serve the major airlines they are contracted with. Every business decision is made at the major airline level and the regional airline, not at the regional airline level. This has been and continues to be factually true. It's the most important distinction separating regional airlines from the major airlines they fly for, because the regional airline cannot be independent in its pilot policies and in many ways, its maintenance policies. Hold on to that fact as we review these accidents. We need to begin with the Air Midwest Flight 5481's Blue Cover Accident Report, AAR 0401. On January 8, 2003, on Air Midwest Beech 1900D, registration number N233 Yankee Victor, crashed in Charlotte Airport in Charlotte, North Carolina. The airliner took off, failed to achieve controlled flight, aerodynamically stalled, lost thrust and lift, then crashed into a hangar. This was actually the second major regional airline accident and instrumental in defining how the FAA, the NTSB, and the various airline industry participants lost sight of true problems. After Air Midwest 5481 crashed, the NTSB launched a GO team, including myself, to investigate the accident. AAR 0401's probable cause stated, the NTSB determines that the probable cause of this accident was the airplane's loss of pitch control during takeoff. The loss of pitch control resulted from the incorrect rigging of the elevator control system, compounded by the airplane's aft center of gravity, which was substantially aft of the certified aft limit. The NTSB's probable cause was the first indication this accident investigation was based on ambiguous opinion, not fact. The primary contributor to this accident was the aft center of gravity, the CG, not the maintenance. This is a critical fact because AAR 0401 was 216 pages of NTSB upper management interferences into one of the most pivotal accident investigations to come out of the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978. NTSB board members and NTSB upper management distorted the facts presented by their own NTSB investigators, promoted opinions, accusations, and their agendas that misrepresented 36 years of regional airline and repair station facts, from 1991 to 2026. It's because of this dismissal of factual information that even years later, the root causes were never addressed or corrected. In fact, as if I was to discover 4 years later in 2007, the problem actually got worse. Hello, I'm Stephen Carbone, and this is By Reason of Air Safety. As I've stated and will demonstrate, Air Midwest 5481's center of gravity, its CG, was too far aft. That was why 233 Yankee Victor crashed. Nothing else. What the NTSB determined to be the primary cause had less to do with the accident than what the NTSB diverted attention away from. To be clear, Air Midwest 5481's maintenance issues did contribute to the accident. However, they weren't a leading cause. How do we know? The accident aircraft 233 Yankee Victor flew 6 successful flights with incorrectly rigged elevators. That is not to say 233 Yankee Victor's elevator rigging system and issues weren't important. They were very important problems. They represented safety problems with regional airlines and their repair stations. Numerous mistakes were made by NTSB investigators in pursuing maintenance issues, and many of them fell on me, the lead NTSB maintenance investigator. To my defense, I was never aware of Air Midwest 5481's CG issues. I should have pushed back against NTSB's upper management to correctly report aircraft maintenance facts. However, in order to follow the mandate of Title 49 CFR Section 831.4, the investigation's purpose was to mitigate future accidents. Addressing the CG and overweight condition issues demanded attention on a more critical regional airline issue, which was operational control. Let's look at the rest of the probable cause. Contributing to the cause of the accident were 1. Air Midwest's lack of oversight of the work being performed at the Huntington, West Virginia maintenance station. 2. Air Midwest's maintenance procedures and documentation. 3. Air Midwest's weight and balance program at the time of the accident. 4. The Raytheon Aerospace Quality Assurance Inspector's failure to detect the incorrect rigging of the elevator control system. 5. The FAA's average weight assumptions in its weight and balance program guidance at the time of the accident. And of course, 6, the FAA's lack of oversight of Air Midwest's maintenance program and its weight and balance program. In pursuing root cause probable cause, contributors numbers 3 and 5 demand we give them further examination. Note, the NTSB employs probable cause in all its reports. Fact, probable cause is undefined. This means probable cause doesn't mean anything. It's inapplicable. Second fact, the rest of the aviation community, including ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, pursues root cause analysis. Probable cause has become antiquated for decades. This must be clearly understood. NTSB aviation probable causes only determine what triggered that particular past accident. The NTSB's mandate dictates the NTSB mitigate future accidents. The NTSB must prevent future accidents by understanding the accident's root cause analysis. It's the only way to mitigate accidents. To pursue root cause, we must look at 2 things. First, after the Airline Deregulation Act was signed, which were the major airlines known as the legacy airlines? Before the year 2000, these were the legacy airlines, some of which, since the start of the 21st century, have merged with others or ceased operations altogether. Of these, Alaska, Aloha, American, Continental, Delta, Northwest, United, and US Air were the major airlines with which regional operators contracted with, and some they continue to contract with for their smaller markets. Regional airlines that contract with the major airlines become absorbed into the major airlines' operations. It became difficult to separate the regional from their major operator. So, what airlines made up US Airways Express? At the time of the accident, 9 regional airlines operated under a regional code share with US Airways, known as US Airways Express. The 9 were Air Wisconsin, Air Midwest, Colgan, Mesa, Piedmont, PSA, Republic, SkyWest, and Trans-States. These 9 generated unapproved ground handling procedures called the EGOM, a major safety breach to be discussed later in this episode. So what exactly happened to Air Midwest 5481? As mentioned, the primary cause of the accident was an operations issue. To be specific, the overweight condition contributed heavily to the inescapable danger, but it was the excessive extreme aft CG that destroyed the aircraft. Everyone must recognize one undeniable fact about what I just said. Air Midwest Flight 5481 was doomed. It could never land after the nose gear left the runway. Even if the elevators were correctly rigged, even with the excessive weight, once the airliner became airborne, it could never land again. Because of control challenges, Air Midwest 5481 could not extend its flaps again, dump fuel, or slow to an approach speed. Everything that could be done to land the aircraft would have resulted in loss of control. Air Midwest 5481 could not land safely. During its takeoff roll, the flight crew did not experience any steering problems. This demonstrated how critical the aircraft's aft CG was. It allowed for ground operations, for ground movement, but did not allow it for flight. The aircraft, as it ran down the runway, lift was produced with no signs of problems. When the aircraft rotated, only one thing was keeping the nose down, and that was the extended nose gear. Extended, the nose gear's weight was the only hope against the stall. This meant the nose gear kept the aircraft level. The Beech 1900D's nose gear was unique. It retracts aft, not forward. Even if the flight crew recognized the stall for what it was still too late to extend the nose gear. If they were fast enough to cycle the handle, the nose gear would not have extended in time to correct the stall. Even so, the aircraft never would have landed safely. With the nose gear's weight having moved aft, the stall was uncontrollable. Even with full elevator authority, the aircraft could not recover. The aircraft did not have enough altitude to do anything. That the aircraft was at such a high angle of attack meant the engines would never produce enough power to sustain flight. The overweight condition and extreme aft CG were the first root causes to question. This solved the mystery of why 233 Yankee Victor crashed. However, the NTSB's job is to prevent, to mitigate future accidents. To do this, the investigation must go beyond this accident airplane itself. Once the safety failure mystery was solved, what happened to 233 Yankee Victor must be corrected so that it never happens again, to ensure any and all mistakes made that led to 233 Yankee Victor's accident would never happen to another Air Midwest airplane or any other operator's fleet aircraft. Since 233 Yankee Victor was so overweight and extremely tail-heavy, the continuing investigation should have gone beyond this accident. For those answers, the investigation had to look at the U.S. Airways Express Regional Airlines ramp operations in Charlotte, as well as other U.S. Airways hubs throughout the system. In 2003, U.S. Airways Express hubs were Charlotte, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Washington National. These ramps were where multiple U.S. Airways Express regional flights transferred passengers with U.S. Airways major flights on the East Coast. Why was it so important to go beyond Charlotte? Wasn't Charlotte the accident airplane's departure point? In AAR 0401, page 1, note 3, it stated, the ramp agents working the flight were employees of Piedmont Airlines, which runs U.S. Airways Express ground operations at Charlotte. Where else were untrained ramp agents working on multiple regional flights? Were they at Reagan National, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh? Piedmont ramp agents who performed weight and balance calculations on Air Midwest 5481 should have been trained to calculate not just the Air Midwest Beech 1900D's weight and balance, but all weight and balance on all U.S. Airways Express regional airlines aircraft. Piedmont operated the de Havilland DHC-7. The 1900D and the DHC-7 are entirely different aircraft. Each aircraft required specialty training beyond the standard CG chart. A search of AAR 0401, as well as the Operation Investigator's Factual Report, amendments, and attachments in the Accident Flights NTSB archives proved to no one in the Operations Investigatory Group checked to see if any Piedmont ramp agents were trained on the Beech 1900D or any other aircraft they were assigned to perform weight and balance calculations on in Charlotte. To be clear, a ramp agent must never perform weight and balance calculations unless that ramp agent was trained on the loading differences of the aircraft they are working on. So why did NTSB investigators and NTSB management dismiss this information since it was critical to the accident aircraft CG? If the Piedmont ramp agents in Charlotte were not trained, then were ramp agents in the hubs in Reagan National, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia trained? We need to understand what center of gravity is and how it affected the Air Midwest 5481 flight. Each aircraft, from a Cessna 150 to an A380, must be balanced for flight. Think of an airplane's longitudinal axis from the nose to the tail as a simple seesaw. To balance the seesaw, to prevent either end of the seesaw from touching the floor, the weights towards the nose and the weights towards the tail must be close, but not exactly the same. What weights are we talking about? Well, each aircraft has an empty weight called the basic operating weight, or BOW. This is the basic airplane sitting on the ramp. As passengers board, cargo, and luggage are loaded as the airplane is fueled for flight, these will affect the aircraft's flight balance. The airplane doesn't have to be perfectly balanced because the pilot can adjust for a nose-heavy or tail-heavy airplane in flight. However, center of gravity must stay within a certain limit during flight. If the center of gravity, the CG, is too far forward or too far aft, the plane becomes unstable and could crash. Each type of U.S. Airways and U.S. Airways Express aircraft has specific CGs and CG ranges. They are affected by how much luggage is loaded and where in the airplane. The regional aircraft are further affected by passengers and their weight. As the aircraft flies, all lift focuses between the wing's leading and trailing edges. This is the CG range, which is where the CG must be kept for safe flight. Any CG that's before the forward leading edge or behind the trailing edge leads to instability. On the side of the three types of airlines, airliners, the major airliner belonging to the U.S. Airways Express legacy airlines, such as the B737, the A320, and the B757. The U.S. Airways Express regional jet, such as the Embraer 145 and the CRJ 200, and the U.S. Airways Express turboprop aircraft, specifically the Beech 1900D and the Saab 340. When any of these aircraft are prepared for flight, the chart must show two different weight totals and their CGs. The first is the empty weight of the aircraft, the passenger weights and the cargo or luggage weights, and this is called a zero fuel weight or ZFW. The second total is with the dispatch fuel, what fuel was loaded on board. This is called the takeoff gross weight or TGOW. Both totals must be inside the forward and aft limits of the chart. As the airplane flies, fuel is burned off. The CG moves aft towards the tail. In 2003, each person that flew on a major airliner such as a 737 or an A320 was assigned an average weight of 175 pounds per passenger with two pieces of luggage. Whether the passenger weighed 300 pounds or 80 pounds, the weights would average out across the length of the plane's cabin. The major airliner is designed to absorb these inconsistencies in weight. Unfortunately, when a passenger moves from a major airliner to a regional aircraft, the passenger weights do not change even though the criticality of CG does change. Regional jets like the Embraer 145 or the CRJ 200 were designed to operate within limited weight restrictions to maintain control of CG. These aircraft were not designed to swap passengers with major airliners on a one-to-one basis. A passenger's weight directly impacts the aircraft's longitudinal balance. For example, a 300-pound man sitting in the first class section will dramatically affect the aircraft's balance if an 80-pound child is sitting in the tail section. If a regional airliner's CG isn't properly controlled with respect to weight and balance, they can be placed in unsafe conditions. Regional jets have luggage storage, whether under the seat or in the overhead throughout the cabin, so weight can be redistributed. Some regional turboprops, like the Beech 1900D and the Saab 340, have even more critical weight and balance problems. To assume the Beech 1900D could swap passengers with a 737 was ludicrous. Before Air Midwest 5481 was dispatched for flight, passengers, total luggage, and cargo should have been reweighed to prevent unexpected imbalances. Why was this? Well, because the Beech 1900D only has aft luggage compartment. There were no overhead bins to distribute weight and limited space under the seats. That 300-pound man and the 80-pound child weights were even more critical than the regional jet. The fact the Piedmont ramp agent was not trained on the Beech 1900D weight and balance procedures doomed this flight to crash. Let's look at a visual analogy, a representation. This is only to make a point. The 737, or any major airliner, the airliner is designed to be a quick-turn airline aircraft. Like the lumber-carrying 18-wheeled tractor-trailer, the weight-carrying capability is higher, and the weight can be distributed adequately to meet the needs of the CG. With an aircraft like the Embraer 145, like the pickup truck, the weight distribution is good for smaller loads. What comes off the 18-wheeler must first be broken down and reweighed or redistributed before the lumber is loaded on the pickup. The regional jet has a limited weight carrying capability because the CG envelope and design lift is very narrow. Far less weight can be loaded and that must be distributed throughout the aircraft. The distribution must be controlled, even up to and including moving passengers inside the cabin to different seats. Even this can be exceeded, resulting in disaster if the design is ignored. However, some turboprop aircraft, like the Beech 1900D, are like cars that are unable to safely carry lumber. They're only designed to carry passengers, maybe a few bags in the trunk. With these turboprops, weren't designed to have passengers and luggage move directly from the major airliner to the turboprop without reweighing and redistributing the luggage and the passengers. When the accident Beech 1900D didn't reweigh, when U.S. Airways Express ramp agents didn't account for weight averages and reweigh the luggage and passengers, they caused the condition for Air Midwest 5481 to crash. A common superstition is that things happen in groups of three. I'm not much for old wives' tales, but some find to be coincidences are telling. 1. The Piedmont ramp agents were not trained on the Beech 1900D aircraft's weight and balance. They also weren't trained to recognize load differences from major airliners to turboprop aircraft. 2. The accident aircraft's takeoff weight exceeded the Beech 1900D's maximum takeoff weight by 323 pounds. That's a large amount of weight for a Beech 1900D. And 3, the accident aircraft's center of gravity far exceeded the allowable and safe design CG range for the Beech 1900D. As the maintenance investigator, what was my investigatory part in this accident investigation? Well, the first thing I discovered was that despite my aircraft maintenance investigatory team's success, NTSB management and board members corrupted the findings. NTSB management and board members used the Air Midwest accident investigation as a means of pushing agendas. All the information presented from the group's investigation didn't make it past NTSB management's editing. A review of the recommendations written by NTSB upper management and board members showed striking disconnects between real aviation problems and assumed problems that had nothing to do with aviation safety. The AAR 0401 report's recommendations were 1. About regurgitating almost word for word established regulations written decades before, such as the 14 recommendations highlighted in blue. 2. Weight and balance issues were raised, but not about how to solve major air carrier airliners trading passengers with regional airliner issues. These 5 recommendations highlighted in red. The problem wasn't changing the standard passenger weights. The problem was using standard passenger weights on regional airliners. And 3, the 2 recommendations in yellow referred to nothing and made no sense at all. NTSB board members and NTSB upper management went for quantity, not quality, recommendations. The AAR 0401 accident report was repetitious nonsense. It wasn't serious reporting, nor did AAR 0401 make aviation any safer. The aircraft maintenance investigatory team discovered 8 aviation regulations from Air Midwest's Continuous Airworthiness Maintenance Program, its CAMP, had been violated. Some regulations were broken numerous times per regulation, such as 1. Air Midwest knew they were in violation of 8 of 9 Air Midwest CAMP regulatory requirements per Title 14 CFR Subpart Lima, as in L. 2. That the maintenance provider, Raytheon Aerospace, violated their contract by firing their employees and hiring temporary unqualified employees in violation of Title 14 CFR Section 121.367, paragraph B, and 121.368, and 121.375. And 3, that Air Midwest hired and maintained on their roster unqualified inspectors in violation of Section 121.371, paragraphs A, C, and D. Air Midwest was ultimately responsible for the maintenance problems, but Raytheon Aerospace was culpable for violating terms of its contract and its regulatory responsibilities to its customer, which was Air Midwest. In addition, NTSB upper management and NTSB board members blocked the aircraft maintenance investigatory team from further investigating 1. Air Midwest's 4 other maintenance facilities to see if those sites were violating the aviation regulations. Before and after the accident, Air Midwest continued to conduct aircraft maintenance at Dubois, Pennsylvania, Farmington North, New Mexico, Little Rock, Arkansas, and Panama City, Florida. 2. Air Midwest maintenance records to determine if other Air Midwest aircraft had also been maintained in violation of Air Midwest camp and the aviation regulations under Part 121. Also, the team was further blocked from investigating pursuing root cause, from researching accurate findings, and from developing effective recommendations. Years later, I was asked to tape an episode of Air Disasters, Season 5, Episode 4, called Dead Weight, which is about the Air Midwest 5481 accident. I discovered that any and all aircraft accident shows are nothing but theater. Facts aren't portrayed as much as the inflated drama. They did refuse to have shown any of the facts that led to the accident in a good light, in a realistic light. It's unfortunate. A show like this could benefit safety. Instead, these shows exploit tragedy for money. And no, I didn't receive a dime. One more important point. At the beginning of this episode, I mentioned something I learned in 2007. In that year, I worked for the FAA in the Eastern Regional Office in Boston. U.S. Airways, specifically the hub's operation in Charlotte Airport, was in my region's jurisdiction. So I was asked by my manager to attend biannual meetings for U.S. Airways Express and their ground operations work group for their Express Ground Operations Manual, commonly called the EGOM. This slide shows a page from the U.S. Airways Express EGOM. It's from Air Midwest 5481's Human Performance Specialist Report, specifically attachment number 19, which was a combination of the operations and human performance reports. What's the point of bringing this U.S. Airways Express EGOM to light? Well, the EGOM was an illegitimate manual. It was written in defiance of the Part 121 regulations. The NTSB operations investigator who reviewed this should have noted that this manual was written against the rules established by each FAA Part 121 Certificate Management Office, each CMO, in other words, for each of the 9 air operators, specifically each CMO's primary operations inspector. For Air Wisconsin CMO, for Air Midwest's CMO, for the Colgan CMO, for the Mesa CMO, for the Piedmont CMO, for the PSA CMO, for the Republic CMO, for the SkyWest CMO, and for the Trans-States CMO. 4 years after the Air Midwest accident, 9 regional carriers for the U.S. Airways were holding these meetings to discuss and decide on regional airline ground operations. Even though I was invited as an FAA representative, the ones that should have been invited, the ones with the authority for accepting changes to any authorized ground operations manuals, were the FAA principal operations inspectors for each of the regional airlines. However, none of the FAA principals were there. None were invited to attend. Furthermore, these unqualified U.S. Airways Express individuals were making changes to manuals they weren't experienced or authorized to make. These were severe violations of safety. To be clear, in 2007, untrained U.S. Airways Express ramp agents were conducting weight and balance calculations exactly the way they did in 2003 when Air Midwest 5481 crashed. That is, with untrained and unqualified ramp agent personnel. Now, I contacted each of the 9 regional airlines' principal operations inspectors and advised them that their airlines were in violation of their certificates. The 9 principal operations inspectors and the 9 principal maintenance inspectors started attending these meetings from that moment on, much to the US Airways Express EGOM writers' dismay. Just so we understand, US Airways Express never learned anything from Air Midwest 5481. They never changed. So what was learned from the Air Midwest 5481 accident? In a word, nothing. US Airways Express safety never improved. Furthermore, they hid safety issues from the FAA at least for 3 years after the accident, 3 to 4 years after the accident. As for the aft CG and overweight condition, the numerous maintenance safety issues, and industry's failure to understand the regional airlines continued to operate unsafely. That this was happening since deregulation was inexcusable. It's clear nothing was learned. As we will see in the next 3 episodes, the problems exist today, and worse, industry still doesn't get it. The FAA still doesn't get it. The NTSB still doesn't get it. I'm sorry. I wish I could give you better news. Until next time, I am Stephen Carbone, reminding you to tab. Think safe, act safe, be safe. God bless.